Hello. Tonight we go to sea with the Vikings. Not to raid, not to battle, but to understand something quieter and perhaps more remarkable. How men lived on the open water, how they slept and ate and found their way under stars. How a wooden ship became for them both shelter and world, because the Viking age was not made only by axes and swords. It was made by planks and tar, by woolen sails, and the patience of men who watched the horizon for days without speaking. The fjord lies perfectly still. Early morning in Norway, somewhere in the late 9th century, though the exact year does not matter. What matters is the mist rising from dark water so slowly you could watch it all morning and not see it move. The air smells of salt and wet stone and pine forests somewhere up the slope, invisible now in the grey. A longship rests in the shallows, not beached, but held by ropes to boulders at the water's edge, its dragon-headed prow turning slightly with each breath of current. The hull is dark with pine tar, almost black, and where the mist touches it, beads of moisture form and run down the strakes like sweat. The ship barely moves. It seems to be waiting. Men walk through the shallows. Their feet are wrapped in wool or sometimes leather, and they make almost no sound on the wet sand. One carries a sack of flour over his shoulder, the coarsely ground barley shifting with each step. Another rolls a barrel of water, the wood damp from the night air, the contents sloshing gently. A third brings dried fish strung on rope, the stiff carcasses clacking softly against each other. No one speaks, not because silence is required, but because there is nothing yet that needs saying. These men have done this before. They know where the barrels go, how to distribute weight along the keel, which sacks must stay dry and which can get wet. The work happens in gestures, a nod toward the stern, a hand raised to pause, the slight tilt of a head asking for help with a heavy load. On the deck, a man coils rope. He works slowly, methodically, the hemp fibers rough against his palms. Beside him, another checks the leather straps that will hold the oars in place, running his thumb along each one, feeling for cracks or weakness. The wool of his tunic is damp at the shoulders. He does not seem to notice. These are not warriors preparing for slaughter. They are men loading supplies for a journey, and the mood is not battle fever, but something closer to resignation. They will leave soon. They will not see this fjord for weeks, maybe months, maybe longer. Some of them will not return. Everyone knows this, and no one speaks of it. A small fire burns further up the shore, barely smoke in the damp air. A man crouches beside it, heating tar in a clay pot. He will make one last pass along the hull before they cast off, sealing any place where the wood might have opened overnight. The tar bubbles slowly. He stirs it with a stick, watching the surface catch light from flames. The mist turns orange and soft. The sun has not yet burned through. It hangs somewhere behind the grey, a brighter patch in the cloud, and the water reflects this paleness without shimmer. A bird calls from the forest, then falls silent. The only other sound is the lap of small waves against the hull, regular and soft, like breath. Why would a man leave this? Leave the solid ground, the fire, the known paths through the trees? Leave the women who wove his clothes, and the children who might not recognize him when he returns? There are many answers, and none of them quite satisfy. But one is simply this: because the ship waited, because the sea called in a way land never could, because there are men who cannot rest when they know what lies beyond the horizon. The last barrel is secured, the tar has cooled. The men stand in the shallows, looking at the ship that will hold them for days to come. Soon they will push it free, climb aboard, and begin the slow pull toward open water. But for now, in this final moment before departure, there is only the mist, the silence, and the soft sound of water against wood. The ship that waits in the shallows is not merely built, it is grown. For years, decades even, the trees stood watching the same fjord that now reflects the morning mist. The oak on the hillside, the pine higher up, the sparse spruce where the soil grew thin, each held its place through storms and sunlight, through winter snow and the slow green of spring. Then came the shipbuilder with his axe, and he did not take these trees lightly. In Norse understanding, a tree possessed its own nature. The oak was stubborn, unyielding, dense with the memory of centuries. The pine was flexible, forgiving, willing to bend when wind demanded. The spruce carried less weight but spread wider, offering surface where surface was needed. The shipbuilder knew these qualities the way a herdsman knows his animals, and he chose accordingly. For the keel, that long spine running the length of the vessel, he wanted oak. Nothing else would do. The keel would bear the weight of everything: the cargo, the crew, the force of waves trying to twist the ship apart. It would grind against unseen rocks in shallow water and take the first shock of every landing. So the oak must be old, must have grown slowly, its rings tight as coiled rope. When the axe finally fell, the tree came down with a sound like thunder, and the forest held its breath. Higher up the hull, where planks must curve and flex with the sea's movement, pine served better. Split lengthwise from straight-grained trunks, these planks could be shaped with axes and knives, coaxed into curves that no modern carpenter would attempt without steam. Norse shipbuilders worked the wood green fresh, still wet with sap, because green wood bent without breaking. They knew what seasoned timber forgot, that flexibility outlasts rigidity, that the tree which swayed in the wind would teach the ship to sway on waves. The planks were fastened not with nails alone, though iron did appear at critical points. The true binding was root and branch, literally. Ropes of twisted lime bast, made from the inner bark of certain trees, laced the planks together where movement was needed. These organic cords could stretch, could absorb shock, could be replaced when they wore. The ship breathed through these joints, expanding when wet, contracting when dry, never quite the same shape 2 days in succession. Then came the tar. Pine tar, rendered from slow-burning logs in earthen kilns, black and viscous, and smelling of smoke and forest fire. Every surface of the hull received it not as paint, but as skin. The tar soaked into the wood fibres, sealing them against water, against rot, against the tiny burrowing creatures that plagued southern ships. It gave the Longship its dark colour, its gleam in certain light, its characteristic scent that sailors would learn to recognize as home. Apply the tar too thin, and water found its way in. Too thick, and it cracked and peeled. The right application required judgment, experience, a sense of how this particular wood, on this particular day, would receive the seal. Some crews carried small pots of tar with them, making repairs at sea, smoothing warm pitch into seams that had opened during a storm. The smell would linger for days afterward, mixing with salt and wet wool and the breath of sleeping men. In the darkness below decks, where no light reached, the ship's interior became a world of texture. Curving ribs of oak or ash rose from the keel like the skeleton of some great beast, each one shaped individually to fit its place. No two ribs were identical, because no two ships were identical, because no two trees had grown the same way. The ship was not manufactured. It was assembled from living things, each piece retaining something of its origin. Sailors came to know their vessel as they knew their own bodies. They learned which planks groaned in a following sea, which joints creaked when the wind came from the north. They noticed how the hull responded to different loads, how she sat lower in the water with a full cargo of trade goods, how she lifted and danced when lightened after a landing. They spoke of the ship as she, not from tradition alone, but because she seemed alive, responsive, possessed of moods and preferences. At dawn, the ship's sounds differed from those at dusk. The wood, chilled overnight, contracted and tightened, producing higher-pitched creaks as the day's first warmth touched it. By afternoon, with the sun on the hull and the sea warm against the strakes, the vessel relaxed into deeper tones, a bass register that vibrated through the deck into the feet of resting men. At night, under stars, the ship sang with the water itself, a continuous low music that became the background of dreams. When storms came, the ship revealed her deepest nature. She did not fight the waves, she worked with them. Her flexible hull twisted slightly, absorbed energy that would have shattered a rigid vessel. The oak keel held steady while the pine planks gave, and the lime-bast ropes stretched and returned, thousands of times through the night. Men huddled on deck or in the small shelters fore and aft, listening to their vessel labor, trusting that the trees which had grown on the hillside remembered how to survive the wind. In the morning, if they survived, they would run their hands along the hull, feeling for damage, for weakness. Often they found none. The ship had bent but not broken, had groaned but not cracked. She had done what living things do, endured. And always, beneath every other scent, the salt, the fish, the wool, the men themselves lay the smell of tar. Dark and smoky and reassuring, it told them the ship was sealed, was sound, was ready for whatever came next. It was the smell of home carried on water. The ropes are cast off. Hands on the hull push against the familiar weight, and the Longship slides backward from the shallows into deeper water. The mist has begun to thin, burning off in patches, revealing glimpses of the fjord's far shore dark cliffs, a scatter of pines, the white line of a distant waterfall. The men are aboard now, settled on their sea chests, each man at his assigned place. The oars rest in their leather loops, blades angled toward the sky. No command is given, not loudly, at least. Perhaps the steersman says a word a quiet now, that carries just far enough. Perhaps the man nearest the bow simply begins, and the others follow because they have done this together before. However it happens, the oars lower. 20 blades touch the water almost simultaneously, and the ship moves. The sound is not what a landsman might expect. It is not the loud splash of recreation, not the shouted rhythm of Hollywood galleys. It is something far softer, a simultaneous dip, a gulp of water displaced, then the long muffled groan of oars working against tholes. The blades pull through the dark water, emerge dripping, rise, swing forward, dip again, over and over. The rhythm establishes itself like a heartbeat. In Old Norse, the word lag meant both a crew and a fellowship, a group of men bound by common purpose. But it also carried meanings of law, of order, of the proper way things should be done. The crew was not just a collection of individuals. It was a structure, a living pattern, something that existed only when each man fulfilled his role in relation to the others. On the oars, this truth became physical. Each man watches the back of the man before him, not consciously, not with fixed attention, but peripherally, a constant awareness of the body in front, the angle of his shoulders, the moment when his oar begins to rise. The stroke comes from the legs and back, not the arms alone, and the experienced rower can maintain it for hours without exhaustion. It is not brute force. It is a kind of meditation, a trance of repetitive motion that empties the mind. The water along the hull begins to speak, at first just a murmur, then a steady chuckle as speed increases, then the continuous whisper of displacement that tells the steersman they are making way. The fjord glides past slowly because even at full stroke a longship moves at walking pace, but steadily, inexorably, the way time itself moves. Cliffs that seemed close recede. New horizons open. The world rotates around the ship's slow progress. Sometimes men sing while rowing. Not always, and not the roaring choruses of popular imagination, but low work songs that match the stroke a few lines repeated, a call and response that helps pass the hours. The songs tell of heroes sometimes, or of women left behind, or of nothing at all, just sounds that fit the rhythm, nonsense words that become meaningful through repetition. But just as often, the rowing happens in silence. The only sounds are the oars, the water, the occasional cry of a seabird, the creak of leather against wood. The steersman at the stern holds the tiller against his hip, feeling the ship's response to each stroke. He does not steer constantly. The ship holds her course well when the rowing is even, but makes small adjustments, compensating for current or wind, keeping the bow pointed toward the fjord's mouth where open sea awaits. His body sways with the motion, unconscious, the way a rider moves with a horse. Hours pass. The sun, finally breaking through, warms the men's backs and dries the damp from their wool. Some strip off outer layers, tying them around waists or stowing them in chests. Skin glistens with sweat despite the cool air. The rhythm continues, unbroken. Men shift on their chests, finding new positions, adjusting to the accumulating ache in shoulders and lower backs. No one complains. Complaint would break something more important than silence. There is a peculiar intimacy to rowing together, not the intimacy of conversation or touch, but something deeper, the intimacy of shared breath, shared effort, shared purpose. Each man knows when the man beside him is tiring. Each feels the collective pulse of the crew, the way the ship responds when everyone digs deep together, the way she lags when attention falters. In a good crew, this awareness becomes instinct. They row as one organism, 20 bodies serving a single will. When the wind fails on long voyages, they will row for days. When the wind is fair, they will ship oars and let the sail work, resting muscles that have earned their rest. But in these first hours of departure, while the fjord still holds them and the familiar hills fade slowly aft, the oars are necessary. They carry the ship from known water toward unknown, from the world of land to the world of sea. The man at the bow, the lookout, watches the water ahead. He calls out occasionally, a log drifting, a change in depth indicated by watercolor, a seal raising its head to watch them pass. His voice carries just far enough, and the steersman acknowledges with a grunt or a nod that no one sees. The rhythm never breaks. Behind them now, the fjord narrows. Ahead, the first hint of open swell, a longer roll beneath the keel, a different quality of motion. They are approaching the mouth, the threshold, the place where land ends and something else begins. The oars continue their slow dance. The ship moves onward, and the men row on, breathing together, bound by nothing but the shared stroke and the water that accepts their blades without complaint. The fjord opens to the sea. The swell changes beneath them, longer, deeper, a breathing motion that has traveled days to reach this shore. The men rest on their oars, breathing hard, watching the steersman for his decision. He looks west, where the water stretches toward horizon, then up at the sky, where clouds move in a way that tells him something. He nods. The sail rises. It comes out of its long storage along the yard, bundled and tied, smelling of wool and smoke, and the dried herbs woven into its folds against moths. 2 men handle the lines, while others guide the heavy cloth, keeping it from tangling, from catching on tholes or chests. The yard creaks as it lifts, the rope running through the mast-top block with a sound like something waking. Then the sail fills. The transformation is immediate and absolute. The ship, which had been a rowboat, a thing of muscle and effort, of backs bent against resistance, becomes something else entirely. The wind catches the wool, presses it into a curved shape almost like a bird's wing, and the Longship answers. She heels slightly, then accelerates, water beginning to rush along the hull with a sound that is not quite like anything else. The oars come in, stowed along the gunwales. The men settle onto their chests and watch the shore begin to move. This cloth above them is not simple. It represents months of work, an entire winter, often, for a sail this size. Women spun the wool fine and strong, then wove it on looms that stood in the main room of every longhouse, the shuttle passing back and forth thousands of times, while children played nearby and snow piled against the walls. They worked patterns into the fabric, sometimes stripes or checks that identified the ship, the family, the region. They worked prayers into it too, though invisibly, by singing them as they wove, by carving symbols into the loom's frame, by consecrating the finished cloth with small offerings before it left the house. The wool itself came from sheep that grazed the coastal pastures, their fleece conditioned by salt spray and thin grass. It contained lanolin still, even after washing and spinning, which made the finished sail slightly water-resistant, not enough to shed a heavy rain, but enough to keep the cloth from becoming waterlogged in normal weather. When the sail did get heavy with spray, it dried slowly, and the crew learned to sleep around its damp edges. Now, filled with wind, it pulls. The mast bends slightly deliberately because the shipwright chose it for this flexibility, and the ropes that hold it creak with tension. The steering oar bites deep, the steersman leaning against the pressure, and the Longship settles onto a course that no human has chosen. The wind has chosen, the sea has chosen, the men merely follow. There is a peculiar silence under sail. Not true silence, the wind makes its own sound, a continuous note that varies with strength, and the water talks against the hull in a language that never quite repeats itself. But the silence of human effort falls away. No grunting, no oar against thole, no heavy breathing. Only the ship doing what ships are meant to do, and the men sitting idle, watching, their bodies at rest while the vessel works. The sun, lower now, lays a path of gold across the water. The shore has shrunk to a dark line behind them, punctuated by mountains that seem to float above the horizon. Ahead, nothing but sea and sky, and the suggestion of clouds far away, over something that might be land or might be more water. The men do not speak much. There will be time for speech later, when the wind fails or darkness falls, or the endless blue begins to weigh on minds. For now, they watch. A man near the mast runs his hand along the wool, feeling the texture his mother or wife or sister created. He thinks of the longhouse, the fire, the smell of cooking that will not reach him for weeks. Then he looks up at the sail, at the way it holds the wind, at the shadows that move across its surface as clouds pass overhead. The cloth pulls steadily, tirelessly, doing work that no human muscle could sustain, and the ship moves onward, not because men force her, but because the wind allows it. Someone checks the lines, adjusting the angle slightly. The sail shifts, finds a better shape, and the Longship responds with a small surge forward. The steersman feels it in the tiller, the way a rider feels a horse gather itself. He says nothing, but something in his posture relaxes. They have good wind, they have good sail, they have good sea ahead. The sun continues its slow descent. The water darkens from gold to grey to something deeper, and the Longship, winged with wool, carries her cargo of silent men toward the line where sky and water become one. The day has gone. The sun, which had been a constant presence through the long northern afternoon, eventually softened to orange, then deepened to red, then slipped below the horizon as if pulled beneath the world. The sky held its colour for a time pale green along the edge, then violet, then the deep blue that precedes true darkness. Now the stars have emerged, one by one at first, then in thousands, until the dome above the ship is thick with light. The wind holds steady from the east. The sail pulls as it has pulled all day, and the Longship continues her motion through water that has grown black and reflective. The steersman, relieved by another, has gone forward to sleep. The man who now holds the tiller is young, perhaps 20, with hands that have learned the feel of this ship through seasons of voyaging. He does not need to see the sail to know its shape. He feels it through the tiller, through the deck beneath his feet, through the subtle shift in balance when a gust presses harder. But his eyes are not on the ship. They are on the sky. Above him, the stars wheel slowly through their appointed paths. He knows them as he knows the faces of his crewmates, not by study, but by long familiarity, by years of watching them appear and disappear with the seasons. There is the wagon, which some call Odin's wagon, its 7 bright stars turning around a point in the sky that never moves. His father taught him to find that point when he was a child. Follow the 2 stars at the end of the wagon's body, the ones that always point toward the north. There, where they lead, hangs the star that does not travel, the star that remains fixed while all others circle. The Norse call it Leidastjana, the leading star, the guiding star. Others will name it Polaris in later centuries, but for now it is simply the one that stays. As long as a man can find it, he knows which way is north, and knowing north, he knows all other directions. The ship's course, set by the afternoon sun, can be checked against this constant light. The young man at the tiller glances up, finds the wagon, follows its pointers, confirms that they have not drifted. Then he looks back at the water, at the blackness ahead, and settles into the long hours of the night watch. Other constellations share the sky. High above, the Pleiades cluster burns with a light that seems softer than the rest, a small gathering of stars that the old men say were once maidens or doves, depending on which story they heard as boys. The young man does not know the stories well. He has spent more time at sea than in halls where tales are told, but he knows the stars themselves. He knows that when the Pleiades reach their highest point, the night is half gone. He knows that when the wagon begins to dip toward the horizon, dawn is approaching. In the east, a bright star rises late Orion's foot, some say, though others call it by names he cannot remember. It blazes with a cold blue light, unmistakable against the darker sky. He watches it climb, marking time by its progress, and feels the small satisfaction of knowing where the night stands without needing to ask. Below deck, or rather below the small shelter at the stern, where the steersman can retreat in heavy weather, a leather bag contains something precious. The young man knows it is there, though he has never seen it used. Inside lies a crystal Iceland spar, some say, though the word means nothing to him. It is called a sunstone, and it is for days when the sky gives no guidance, when clouds hide the sun and fog obscures the horizon, when even the experienced eye cannot tell where light comes from. The sunstone can find the hidden sun. Held to the sky, rotated slowly, It reveals polarization patterns invisible to the naked eye, rings of light that center on the sun's true position, even when the sun itself cannot be seen. The young man has heard the stories. He knows that King Olaf himself used such a stone, that it guided ships through weather that would have left others lost and drifting. But he has never seen it used, and he is not sure he believes. The stars are enough. The stars have always been enough. A sound behind him, one of the crew shifting in sleep, murmuring something unintelligible, then falling quiet again. The ship creaks softly, a regular complaint from a plank somewhere forward. The water continues its endless conversation with the hull. The young man checks the tiller, adjusts slightly, then looks up again. The wagon has moved. Not much, but noticeably. The hours are passing. He thinks of nothing in particular, of the woman he left behind, of the meal he will eat when his watch ends, of the fish he saw leaping at sunset. Thoughts come and go like waves, without effort, without insistence. The night is long, and thinking too hard only makes it longer. By the time the eastern sky begins to pale, he is tired, but content. The stars fade, one by one, retreating before the approaching sun. The wagon is still visible, just, its pointers still aimed at the place where the guiding star will soon disappear into daylight. He marks the position, files it away, knows that tonight it will return. The man who will relieve him stirs, sits up, rubs his face. They exchange a glance, a nod, a few murmured words about the wind. The tiller changes hands. The young man moves forward, finds his place among the sleeping crew, wraps himself in wool and fur. Above him, the last stars fade, the ship sails on, and in the leather bag at the stern, untouched, the sunstone waits for days when even the stars cannot help. The third morning comes without land. The second had also been without land, and the first after the final glimpse of mountains sinking below the horizon. But the third morning carries a different weight, a recognition that something has changed, that the world has become something else, that the ship no longer travels between shores, but exists in a realm where shores may not exist at all. The man who keeps the dawn watch sees the sun rise over water that stretches unbroken to every edge of vision. East, west, north, south, only water, only sky, only the long curve where they meet in a line that never comes closer no matter how long the ship sails. He has seen this before, on other voyages, but each time it requires adjustment. Each time the mind must accept what the eyes report, that land has vanished, that the known world has withdrawn, that this small wooden shell with its 20 men is now the only solid thing in existence. The Norse have a word for this state, hafilla. It means being bewildered at sea, lost, uncertain of direction. But it carries more than simple navigation failure. Hafilla is the condition of being between, of having left one world without yet reaching another, of existing in the grey space where normal rules suspend. Some sagas speak of men who were hafilla for days or weeks, who sailed through mists that hid the sun and stars, who emerged in places that should not exist or at times that made no sense. The state is not merely physical, it touches something deeper. On the deck, men go about their morning tasks with the economy of those who have done them many times. The sail is checked, lines adjusted, water ration measured from the barrels. Someone chews dried fish slowly, staring at nothing. Another sharpens a knife with long, even strokes, the sound carrying across the deck like a small meditation. No one speaks of the absence of land. Speaking would give it weight. The water today is a deep grey blue, almost purple in certain lights. Swells move beneath the ship in long, regular intervals, lifting and lowering the hull with a motion so constant that the body forgets any other way of being. Men sway without thinking, their muscles adjusted to this rhythm, their sleep shaped by it. On land, they would stumble. On land, they would feel the absence of this movement like a loss. A bird passes a single seabird, far off, flying with purpose towards somewhere. Every man notes it, every man watches until it disappears. Then they return to their tasks, or their silences, or their slow scanning of the horizon that continues whether they intend it or not. The sun climbs. The day warms slightly. Someone mends a torn strap, the awl punching through leather with a small, decisive sound. Another combs tangles from his beard with fingers, then with a bone comb, the teeth catching in ways that require patience. Time passes, though measuring it seems pointless. There is only now, only this moment, only the ship and the sea and the sky that contains them. In the afternoon the wind shifts, not dramatically, just a few degrees, a slight change in the sail's curve that requires adjustment. The steersman feels it, calls softly for a line to be trimmed, and the ship responds with a small change in heading. No one asks where they are going, no one could answer. The sun begins its long descent toward evening. The water changes color again, taking on gold, and then rose, and then the deep violet that precedes night. Stars emerge in the east, while the west still glows, and for a time, the sky holds both day and night in tension. Then dark takes over, and the ship becomes a constellation of small lights, the glow of a covered ember somewhere forward, the pale shapes of faces turned upward, the occasional spark when someone strikes steel against flint for no reason, but to see something change. The night watch settles in. Above, the stars turn in their familiar patterns, the wagon, the Pleiades, the bright star that rises late. They are the same stars that shone over the fjord, over the longhouse, over every place these men have ever known. In that sameness lies comfort. The stars, at least, have not abandoned them to Havila. The stars still know where north lies. Below, in dreams, some men walk on land. They feel soil beneath their feet, grass, the solid, unchanging earth that does not lift and fall with every breath of sea. They wake to darkness and motion and the distant creak of the hull, and for a moment they do not know where they are. Then memory returns, or acceptance, and they close their eyes again. The ship sails on through the starry dark. Around it, water stretches to every horizon, endless and indifferent and alive. And the men within it sleep, or wake, or watch, each in his own relation to the void that holds them, each finding his own way to endure the incomprehensible fact of so much water, so much sky, so much space between one world and the next. The sun has crossed its zenith and begun the long slope toward evening. On deck, men stir from the half-sleep of those who have nothing immediate to do. The rhythm of the day at sea demands little checks of the sail, glances at the sky, the occasional adjustment of a line. But it also demands food, and the bodies of these men, accustomed to the heavy meals of winter hearths, have begun to remember that they are hungry. One man rises, steps carefully around sleeping crewmates, and makes his way to the bow where the food barrels are lashed against the curve of the hull. He kneels, works the lid loose a seal of greased cloth keeping out salt spray, and reaches inside. His hand emerges with a piece of dried fish, stiff as wood, grey-brown along the edges where smoke cured it months ago. He passes it to another man, reaches in again, repeats the motion until each crew member holds his portion. The fish is not eaten immediately. It must be worked first, chewed slowly, softened by saliva, broken into fibers that the stomach can handle. Men sit with it in their cheeks like chewing tobacco, working it while they watch the water, while they think whatever thoughts occupy men who have seen no land for days. The taste is salt and smoke, and something deeper, the essence of fish concentrated, preserved, made durable against the long months when fresh food cannot be found. Beside the fish barrel stands another, smaller, containing flatbreads baked before departure, barley and oats ground coarse, mixed with water, cooked on hearthstones until hard as pottery. These too require patience. Men break off pieces, dip them in water from the drinking barrel to soften, then chew with the slow deliberation of those who have learned that eating too fast brings no benefit. The bread tastes of smoke from the baking fire, of the grains that grew in thin coastal soil, of the hands that shaped it before the voyage began. Water is the constant concern. Each man receives a measured portion morning and evening, not because the barrels run low yet, but because no one knows how long the voyage will take. The water, stored in casks that once held other things, has grown warm and flat. It carries a taste of wood, of the tar that seals the casks, of its own stagnation. Men drink it anyway, gratefully, because the body demands, and because the alternative does not bear considering. Sometimes, in the first days of a voyage, there is buttermilk or sour whey in small kegs, a taste of the farm carried to sea. These are opened early, drunk quickly, before they can spoil further. The sharpness cuts through the monotony of dried fish, reminds men of what they left behind. But by the third day without land, such luxuries are memories. Only the basics remain. Eating requires no ceremony. Men sit where they are, on sea chests or coils of rope, on the bare planks of the deck. They hold food in their hands, hands that have rowed, handled lines, done the work of the ship. When finished, they wipe those hands on their trousers. The wool absorbs grease well enough and return to whatever occupied them before. No plates, no bowls, no tables. The ship provides no furniture for dining, and the men expect none. At night, if the sea is calm and the wind holds, the small clay pot appears. It contains embers from the last fire on shore, carried carefully, fed with bits of fuel to keep them alive. Someone adds dried moss, blows gently, coaxes a flame. Above it, a small pot of water begins to heat. Into this water goes crushed dried fish, a handful of coarse oatmeal, perhaps a scrap of fat kept for just this purpose. The mixture bubbles, thickens, becomes something approaching a meal. Men gather close, sharing the warmth, dipping their wooden spoons into the common pot. The spoons are personal, each man carries his own, carved from wood or bone, marked in ways that identify ownership. They dip, eat, dip again, the hot food a shock after days of cold rations. But such nights are rare. More often the fire cannot be risked. More often men eat in darkness, by touch and memory, reaching into barrels they cannot see. The fish tastes the same in darkness. The water tastes the same. The body accepts what it is given. On the seventh day without land, a man opens his sea chest and finds, wrapped in cloth, a small piece of butter his wife placed there before departure. He does not mention it. He breaks it into tiny portions, passes them to the men nearest him. They eat it slowly, letting it melt on tongues that have forgotten such richness. No one thanks him. Thanks would break something. But for the rest of that day, the voyage feels different. The butter has changed nothing and everything. The barrels grow lighter. The water sloshes lower in its casks. But the men continue eating, continue sailing, continue existing on portions that would not sustain a child on land. And somehow, impossibly, they do not starve. The body, it seems, knows things the mind does not. It knows how to wait. It knows how to endure. It knows that the next shore, the next fire, the next hot meal lies somewhere ahead, and that reaching it requires only that they continue. The wind dies at sunset, not gradually, not with the usual signs of shifting weather, but simply one moment filling the sail, the next a memory, the canvas hanging limp against the mast. The longship slows, loses way, begins to drift on the swell, with no direction but the sea's own mood. The steersman tries the tiller, feels nothing, shrugs. There is nothing to be done. They will wait. Oars are shipped, drawn in from their loops and laid along the thwarts. The ship rises and falls with the slow breath of the water, each swell lifting then settling, a motion without purpose. The sky darkens fully, stars emerging in their countless thousands, and the men sit in silence, listening to the lap of water against the hull. It is the sound they have heard for days, but now it seems louder, more present, occupying space that the wind has abandoned. Then someone speaks. It begins without ceremony, without announcement. A man near the mast clears his throat and says, in a voice that carries just far enough, "I remember a story my grandfather told." He pauses, as if waiting for permission, but no one denies him. In the darkness, faces turn toward the sound. The ship settles into attention. The story is old, even for him. It concerns a hero named Bodvar, who came to the court of a king and found it troubled by a creature that appeared each night, that could not be killed by any weapon yet tried. The man tells it plainly, without ornament, the way he heard it as a child sitting by his own grandfather's fire. He describes Bodvar's arrival, the silence of the hall at evening, the way the creature emerged from darkness when all lights failed. His voice rises and falls with the tale, finding rhythms that the wind no longer provides. When he finishes, another man picks up without pause. He tells of Thor. Not the Thor of formal myth, but a Thor his mother described, a figure almost comic, almost human, who once disguised himself as a bride to recover his hammer and nearly gave himself away by eating an entire ox at the wedding feast. The men laugh softly, a sound that seems strange after so many days of silence. The laughter passes, settles, leaves behind something warmer than before. The night continues. Story follows story, each building on the last, each carried by a different voice. Some men tell of voyages they have made, of lands they have seen, of storms that should have killed them but did not. Others tell of their fathers, their grandfathers, men whose names would otherwise be forgotten. One man, young and uncertain, begins a tale he only half remembers, stumbles, and another helps him find the thread. The story becomes theirs together, shaped by two voices instead of one. In the great halls of chieftains, skalds perform for kings. They train for years, master complex meters, learn hundreds of verses by heart. They are professionals, artists, men whose value lies in their memory and their skill. But here, on the deck of a ship stalled in windless night, every man is a skald. The stories belong to all of them, passed from grandfather to father to son, carried in memory not because they were studied, but because they were lived, because they mattered, because they said something about what it means to be human in a world of cold and dark and uncertain seas. A man speaks of the gods of Odin hanging on the world tree, wounded by his own spear, sacrificing himself to himself for the sake of wisdom. He speaks of the runes revealed in that agony, the knowledge purchased with pain. The men listening do not comment, do not interpret. They simply receive, letting the images settle into whatever place such images occupy. Another tells of the beginning and the end of Ymir, whose body became the world, and of Ragnarok, when the world will end. He describes the wolf that swallows the sun, the serpent rising from the sea, the ship made of dead men's nails that sails for the final battle. His voice is calm, matter-of-fact, as if he speaks of weather or fishing. The end of all things, delivered in the same tone as a report on the morning's catch. Time passes without measure. The stars wheel overhead, marking hours that no one counts. The ship continues its slow rise and fall, indifferent to the stories told upon its deck. But the men have changed, subtly, in ways they could not name. The stories have done what stories do, have bound them together, have reminded them that they are not merely individuals sharing a vessel, but a crew, a fellowship, a group held by something deeper than proximity. When the first breath of wind stirs the sail, hours before dawn, no one complains. The stories have run their course, have settled into the spaces between men where they will remain. The sail fills, the ship responds, the night watch returns to its duties. But something of the stories lingers, a warmth, a connection, a sense that the darkness holds more than just sea and sky. It holds voices, memories, the accumulated weight of all the grandfathers who ever told tales to children who would one day tell them at sea. The man who spoke first hours ago wraps himself in his cloak and settles to sleep. Around him, the others do the same or take up their watches. The ship moves forward into the dark, carrying its cargo of stories toward whatever shore awaits. And the stars, which have heard all of it, continue their slow and patient turning. The wind has returned, steady from the east, and the sail pulls as it should. But the men who labored through the day have reached their limit. One by one, they find their places on the deck between thwarts, against the curved ribs of the hull, in whatever space offers enough length to stretch their legs. The ship carries them, but for the next hours, they will not carry the ship. The sail comes down, not the entire sail that would leave them drifting, but enough of it, the lower portion unfastened and pulled forward to create a shelter. The heavy wool folds into itself, becomes a roof above the sleeping men, a barrier against spray and the worst of the wind. Beneath them, the folded portion serves as mattress, thick enough to cushion against the hard planks, warm enough to hold the heat of bodies through the cold night. A man with a sheepskin rolls it out, adds its fleece to the bedding. Another has furze seal, maybe, or reindeer, and these too become part of the shared nest. Sleep comes differently at sea. On land, a man stretches into the solid earth, lets his weight settle into something that will not move. Here the ship continues its motion, the slow lift and fall, the occasional shudder when a wave strikes at an angle, and the body must accept that movement, must relax into it rather than fighting. Men who cannot learn this find sleep impossible. Men who learn it find that they cannot sleep on land. The first watch settles near the stern, 3 men who will keep the ship through the dark hours. They speak in murmurs, voices low enough not to carry to the sleepers. One watches the stars, another the set of the sail. The third simply sits with his back against a chest, eyes moving across the water though there is nothing to see. They will wake others when the night has run its course, and those others will take their turn, and the cycle will continue until dawn. Among the sleepers, sounds emerge. A man snores not loudly, but with a steady rhythm that becomes part of the ship's music. Another sighs in sleep, a long exhalation that speaks of dreams or simply of muscles finally releasing. A third murmurs words that no one hears, words from whatever landscape his mind has constructed from memory and longing. The sounds mix with the creak of wood, the lap of water, the occasional flap of canvas when the wind shifts slightly. Together, they form the night music of the Longship. Sleep under the sail is not deep. The body remains half aware of motion, of cold, of the proximity of other bodies. Men turn, adjust, find new positions. An arm thrown across a neighbor is accepted without comment, moved aside without waking. The intimacy of the deck allows no privacy, and privacy is not desired. Warmth matters more. Touch matters more. The shared vulnerability of sleep at sea binds them in ways that wakefulness cannot. A man wakes suddenly, heart pounding, certain that something is wrong. He lies still, listening, feeling. The ship moves normally. The watch talks quietly nearby. The sail covers him. Whatever danger his dream constructed was not real. He closes his eyes, waits for sleep to return, and after a time it does. The change of watch comes with almost no words. The steersman touches the shoulder of a sleeper, who wakes instantly, sits up, nods. He rises, moves to the stern, takes the tiller. The man he replaced finds the warm place left behind, settles into it, is asleep within moments. No conversation, no thanks, no acknowledgement that anything has happened. The ship continues. The night continues, only the faces change. In the darkest hours, before any hint of dawn, the sea seems to grow louder. The hull's conversation with the water becomes more intimate, more present. Men sleeping nearest the planks feel each wave as a vibration through the wood, a pulse that travels from the sea into their bones. They dream of water, of drowning, of swimming through endless dark, but they do not wake. The dreams pass, become other dreams, fade into the grey of approaching morning. The youngest crew member, perhaps 15, sleeps curled against his older brother. In sleep, he looks younger still, the tension of his waking face relaxed, the effort of being a man among men temporarily suspended. His brother watches him for a moment, then looks away, out at the dark water. He will keep this image, this moment of his brother at peace, through years to come. Such is the gift of the night watch, time to see what daylight hides. Before dawn, a change in the light, though the sun remains below the horizon. The stars fade, the sky pales, the water shifts from black to grey. Sleepers stir, stretch, begin the slow process of waking. The sail above them lightens, becomes visible as wool instead of just shadow. Someone forward begins to move, to prepare for the day's first tasks. But for a few moments longer, most remain in that border between sleep and waking warm beneath the sail, rocked by the sea, held by the ship that has carried them through the night. They will rise soon. They will eat, work, watch the horizon. But now, in this last pocket of darkness, they rest. And the ship, patient and enduring, carries them toward whatever the day will bring. The bird appears at midday. It comes from nowhere, one moment the sky empty, the next a white shape against the grey, wheeling once, then settling on the water not far from the ship. Men notice. They do not speak of it, not yet, but they notice. A seabird, yes, and seabirds range far from land. But this one seems at rest, seems comfortable, seems to be waiting for something. The ship sails past it, and the bird lifts briefly, then settles again behind them. An hour later, another bird, then another. Soon there are several, visible at different points around the compass, some flying with direction, others simply present. The men on watch begin to scan the horizon with more intent. Not obsessively, that would betray hope, and hope is dangerous at sea, but with a new attention, a new willingness to look for something beyond the endless circle of water. Then the wind shifts. It is a small shift, hardly noticeable to a landsman, but the man at the tiller feels it, and the men with any sea sense feel it too. The air carries something new, not just salt, not just the clean smell of open water, but something underneath. Green, sweet. The smell of growing things, of earth, of places where water runs fresh over stone. The smell of land. The Norse know this smell. They have names for its variations. The scent of birch woods, of meadows, of the tidal flats where fresh water meets salt. They have followed it through fog, through darkness, through days when navigation offered no certainties. The nose, they say, remembers what the eyes forget. A man who has spent his life on coastal farms carries within him a catalogue of land smells, each distinct, each capable of calling up entire landscapes from memory. The first man to catch it today is old, at least by Viking standards 40 winters, perhaps more. He has been sitting with his back to a chest, eyes closed against the sun, when his nostrils flare. He sits up, turns his head slowly, samples the air from different directions. Then he rises, moves to the steersman, and speaks quietly. The steersman listens, nods, adjusts course slightly toward the scent. Others notice now. Heads turn, faces lift, nostrils work. The smell is faint but unmistakable. Something like grass drying, something like flowers, something like the memory of every fire ever built on a shore. Men who have not spoken for hours begin to murmur. Not words, exactly, but sounds, small expressions of something that might be relief, might be hunger for the solid, might be simply the recognition that the journey approaches its end. The birds multiply. Gulls mostly, but others too smaller birds, land birds, birds that have no business this far from shore. A tern plunges into the water nearby, emerges with a fish, flies toward wherever its nest waits. The men watch it disappear, and in their watching is a kind of longing. Someone laughs. It is a strange sound after so many days, unexpected, almost shocking. But others pick it up, and soon there is genuine amusement passing through the crew. Not at anything in particular, just at the fact of laughter, at the possibility of it, at the way the body produces joy when joy becomes available again. The steersman keeps his course. The smell grows stronger, more complex now. He can pick out individual notes. The sweetness of heather, the dampness of peat, the faint organic rot of tidal marshes. Each component tells him something about the land ahead. Heather means hills, open country. Peat means bogs, wet ground. The tidal smell means they approach a coast with shallows, with beaches where fresh water meets salt. Behind him, men begin to prepare. Sea chests are opened, inspected. Items that have been stowed for days are brought out. Shoes that will be needed on land, knives that will serve for tasks beyond shipboard work, combs for hair that salt wind has tangled into ropes. No one says they are preparing to land. No one needs to. A young man, the same who slept curled against his brother nights ago, stands at the bow. He stares toward the western horizon, willing it to reveal what he knows must be there. For a long time, nothing. Then, just at the edge of vision, a smudge, darker than cloud, more solid than the shifting line between sea and sky. He blinks, looks away, looks back. It remains. He does not call out. The sighting is not his alone to announce, but his brother notices his posture, follows his gaze, and sees it too. Then another, and another. Soon the whole crew watches the western horizon, where something solid has begun to take shape against the endless blue. The man who first smelled land sits quietly, accepting the small honors that come his way, a touch on the shoulder, a nod, a shared piece of dried meat from someone's personal store. He will be remembered for this, for his nose, for his ability to find home across empty water. It is a small fame, but real. At sea, such things matter. The ship sails on. The smudge grows, becomes distinct hills first, then the suggestion of coastline, then the white line of waves breaking against something that does not move. The birds wheel and cry around them, welcoming or warning. It does not matter which. The men stand at the rails, watching, and in their watching is all the weight of days without sight of anything but water. Land rises to meet them. The journey, for now, is ending. The keel touches sand. Not gently, there is a shudder, a grinding sound, a sudden slowing that throws men forward against their balance. Then the ship stops, held by the beach, and for the first time in days, the motion ceases. The hull settles, rocks once with the retreating wave, then settles again. The world, which has been moving continuously, becomes still. Men look at each other. No one moves. The absence of motion is almost frightening, almost wrong. Then someone laughs a short, surprised sound, and the spell breaks. They are ashore. Into the water they go, bare-legged, the cold shocking after the relative warmth of the deck. They spread along the hull, find positions, and on some unspoken signal they push. The ship groans, resists, then begins to move up the sand. Another wave helps, lifting slightly, and they push harder. The keel digs in, finds purchase, and the Longship settles above the high tide line, safe for now. Legs wobble on solid ground. Men who have walked decks for days without thought now find the unmoving earth treacherous. They stagger, catch themselves, laugh again. The laughter is easy now, released by the simple fact of land, of sand beneath feet, of the end of voyaging, even if only temporary. Someone begins gathering driftwood. Others follow, spreading along the beach, returning with arms full of bleached branches and broken timbers. A fire pit is dug, lined with stones from the water's edge. The precious embers, carried so carefully through days at sea, are brought ashore in their clay pot. A man kneels, adds moss and twigs, blows gently. Smoke rises, then a flame, then the first true fire they have known since leaving home. The crackling is loud after the relative quiet of the sea. Sparks rise into the evening air, disappear against the darkening sky. Men gather close, holding out hands, feeling heat on faces that have grown accustomed to wind and spray. Someone adds a larger piece of wood, and the fire accepts it, consumes it, grows hungrier. Wet wool steams. Men who have worn the same clothes for days, whose garments have absorbed salt spray and sweat, and the occasional wave over the bow, now strip to the skin and hold tunics toward the flames. Steam rises from the fabric, carrying smells of sea and body and the smoke of the fire itself. They turn the clothes, shift them, find new angles for drying. Naked or half-naked, they move around the fire with the ease of those who have no modesty left to preserve. Food preparation begins. The small pot appears, larger pots from the ship, anything that can hold water and be placed near flames. Dried fish goes in, along with oatmeal, along with precious scraps of fat, saved for just this moment. The mixture bubbles, thickens, releases smells that make men's mouths water. Someone has found fresh water a stream further up the beach, cold and clean, and they drink it slowly, savoring the taste of something that has not been stored in wooden casks. A man sits apart, working on a torn line. His fingers, stiff with cold and salt, move slowly through the rope, separating strands, twisting new ones into place. The work is patient, methodical, the kind of work that requires no thought and therefore allows thought to wander. He listens to the sounds behind him, the fire, the voices, the occasional burst of laughter, and feels something close to peace. Others talk quietly. They speak of the voyage just ended, of moments that might have been dangerous, but now seem only memorable. They speak of the land ahead, of what they might find, of the people who might live there. They speak of home, of wives and children, of the farms they left and will return to when the season turns. The talk flows without direction, without purpose, simply the sound of human voices in the safety of firelight. The youngest crew member, the one who slept curled against his brother, now sits close to the flames, watching them with an intensity that suggests he has never truly seen fire before. Perhaps he hasn't, not this fire, not after days at sea, not with the knowledge of what it means to be without it. His brother watches him, says nothing, feels something shift in his chest. Night deepens. The fire burns lower, fed occasionally, allowed to settle into coals that will last until morning. Men begin to arrange themselves around it, not too close, not too far, finding the distance that suits their need for warmth. Some will sleep on the sand, wrapped in the same wool that now hangs dry on rocks near the flames. Others will return to the ship, preferring the familiar curve of hull to this strange, unmoving earth. The man who mended rope finishes his work, tests the line, nods. He looks up at the stars, the same stars that guided them here, that will guide them away when the time comes. Then he looks at the fire, at the men around it, at the Longship resting dark against the paler sand. Tomorrow they will explore, or trade, or simply rest. Tomorrow there will be decisions and actions, and the business of being ashore. But tonight there is only this: fire, food, the warmth of human company, the simple animal satisfaction of having reached solid ground. Tonight they rest. Tonight they are home, even if home is only a beach on an unknown coast, even if the ship waits to take them away again. The fire has burned to coals. Red embers pulse beneath grey ash, breathing with the night air, casting just enough light to show the shapes of sleeping men. They lie scattered around the dying glow, some on their backs, some curled, some with arms thrown over companions against the cold. Their breathing is slow and deep, the breathing of those who have travelled far and will travel farther still. Beyond them, the Longship rests on sand. The tide has risen since they dragged her ashore. Water now laps at her stern, lifts it slightly with each wave, lets it settle back. The motion is gentle, almost unnoticed, but it is there a reminder that she does not belong here. She belongs to the sea. She has only borrowed this beach, this stillness, this night of rest. Her hull gleams darkly in starlight. The pine tar that sealed her against the waves now catches faint reflections, silver along each strake, black in the shadows between. Her mast rises against the sky, bare of sail, a bare pole that seems almost like a tree. Again, a tree that remembers growing on a hillside, that remembers wind moving through branches rather than wool. The dragon head at her prow, removed for landing, lies beside her on the sand. Without it, she looks incomplete, waiting for something. The same stars that guided them here turn overhead. The wagon, the Pleiades, the bright star that rises late, all are there, unchanged, indifferent to the fact that men have reached land. They will continue their wheel through the night, through tomorrow, through all the nights of the voyage to come. They have seen 1,000 ships make landfall on 1,000 shores. They will see 1,000 more. The wind blows softly from the east, the same wind that filled their sail for days. It moves through the grass beyond the beach, rustles the wool of sleeping men, touches the hull of the ship with a sound that is almost a whisper. The ship hears it. Even in rest, even drawn ashore, she listens. She knows what the wind means. She knows what the tide means. She knows that morning will come, and with it the push back into water, the rise of sail, the departure toward whatever lies beyond. But not yet, not now. Now there is only night and sleep and the slow breath of men who have earned their rest. Now there is only the ship waiting patiently on sand, water touching her stern, stars turning above her mast. Now there is only the space between voyages, that precious interval when nothing is required, when the journey pauses, when men and ship alike can simply be. On the beach, a sleeper murmurs and turns. He dreams of home, perhaps, or of the sea, or of nothing at all. Another sighs, settles deeper into the sand that will be unfamiliar to his body come morning. The coals pulse once, twice, then fade further toward ash. The ship waits. She will always wait. It is her nature to hold, to carry, to endure the spaces between voyages. She has carried these men across open water, through wind and calm, through days without land and nights without sleep. She will carry them again when the time comes. But for now, she rests, and in her resting she watches over them. The tide rises further, lifts her stern a little higher. She responds with a small movement, almost imperceptible, a settling, an acceptance, a recognition of the sea's persistence. The water will not stop, the wind will not stop, and neither, finally, will she.